Shout out to Josh Lovelady. He was awesome. Thank you so much for joining the show. The insight that he had on Caleb Downs as a player, you get to know, especially when you coach him for 4 years at the varsity level in high school. He knows Caleb Downs as well as anybody. That was really cool.
It's always a surreal experience seeing. I mean, we've seen it tangentially from covering high school athletes at all levels to some degree when they get to that moment and seeing them transition to the professional level. It is a surreal feeling.
We talked about this with Malachi Lawrence when we got the draft video of him. Like, it's not just a player realizing their dream, it's all the people that helped them along the way. And then you hear him talk about the impact that Caleb had on him, not just as a coach, but the impact that he had on him as a dad, the impact he had on his daughter. Like, I'm more excited about Caleb Downs than I was Thursday of last week, and I was pretty excited.
I imagine that may be the case for you out there watching as well after seeing what Josh Lovelady had to say. But we were talking about this yesterday, even before we had the chance to hear from his high school coach. People are extremely excited for Caleb Downs to be a Dallas Cowboy, and it started us down the path of what's the last draft pick that had Cowboys Nation this fired up. And there are a number of different possible answers. Let's flash up the first slate of history, VO50. This is the last 10 years worth, just to give you a picture of what we're talking about. Yes, a lot of Tylers in there. Obviously, 2019.
A lot of linemen.
Yes, that's what they do well.
That is part of the question here. We're not diagnosing was this a good pick. It's about fan excitement, because I think a lot of people, when they think offensive lineman, it's like, okay, another guy that's going to be very good at his job, but I won't be talking about a lot, which is part of the issue.
Exactly, because I think even somebody like Micah Parsons or C.D. Lamb, that obviously those picks worked out very, very well. Were you as excited in May, in late April, about the fact that they drafted him? You were probably super excited about both of those, but I think with Micah, we didn't really know until like week 2 or week 3 of his rookie year, and everybody went, oh, okay, that's who this dude is? And then your excitement went to a different zenith. I think people were really excited about C.D. Lamb, but did you really need him? They had Amari Cooper. He just kind of fell in their lap, and we got to draft this kid. Right. So they did, and he's worked out phenomenally well. But was your excitement level at this kind of zenith like it is for Caleb Downs, because they got a dude that they needed, and he's unbelievably gifted and looks like he's going to be a superstar?
I think that's probably, like, the context to the pick is equally as important in this question, because if the Cowboys defense last year wasn't historically bad, if they didn't have a single defensive back who could diagnose a coverage last year, I don't think that we would be sitting here today being like, oh, they got a kid genius walking through the door at number 11 from the draft. Like, I think the reason we are this level of excited about Caleb is because it was so bad last year, especially not just at the safety position. And we talked about this after the draft. Like, that position itself in isolation, maybe not as highly valued as others, which I think plays into answering this question. However, in the context of last year and in the context of the need being so dire, I mean, even when they drafted CD, like that season, they needed defensive holes filled. Yes. Yet they still took CD because
he was considered a luxury at that point.
And before this draft, they even pointed to that decision, and they were like, hey, if there's an offensive player that is jumping off the board at us and they're available when we're picking, like, we're not going to not do it. They needed to not do it. And
especially when Caleb is available.
This was that
plays into
he's penicillin. He is penicillin for this Cowboys defense. He is the elixir that fixes all of their problems, that cures their illness. Did I properly explain the analogy for you? The look that went across Michelle's face. He's what?
But I mean,
he is, though. He's correct. At least that's the hope, anyways, that he's the fix.
When we first had this question posed, though, my first thought was, and you can see the smug faces in the background right now. My first thought was Ezekiel Elliott, and there was some context there that I had forgotten because it had been 10 years since then. But and some of it is revisionist history based off of his rookie year and how it unfolded. But I do think him as a college player coming in, that was kind of the first standard for me, where I was going, at least in recent Cowboys memory, that That's the first one I think of.
Yes.
Um,
and so if we pull up some of these viewer comments, because that's exactly where a couple of people went. I put this out there on Facebook yesterday, and there were hundreds of comments about this. 54 VO comment 1. Brent Noling says the answer is definitely Zeke. People didn't know how good Micah was or how good CD was going to be. I'm not sure about the CD part. I think we knew CD was going to be really, really good. We knew Zeke was going to be great right away and what we needed at the time. And part of the context there is that this was after they had lived through the 2015 season, which was the year where they decided to move on from DeMarco Murray, who was amazing in 2014, led the NFL in rushing, and they decided we're not going to give him a big money contract. We're going to let him walk. He went to Philly, and the Cowboys' running game suffered dramatically in 2015. So Zeke coming in at a position of need and a superstar at the collegiate level, ironically also from Ohio State, I think definitely fits the bill. But if we pull up 55, there was a rebuttal to this concept that it was Zeke, because this was also part of the storyline. Jalen Ramsey went 5 in that draft.
Right.
And that was the thought process for the Cowboys, was do you go with Zeke at the running back position, or do you go Jalen Ramsey at corner? There was also a little bit of a thought that they may have drafted the quarterback of the future that year. Didn't end up working out that way. Probably good that it didn't work out that way, because Carson Wentz was the guy that if he had fallen to 4, they may have taken. Philly got him at 2, and I think they're probably just fine with the way that draft matriculated, and they got Dak Prescott later that same draft.
Slight revisionist history based on Carson Wentz's first year, by the way, because he was an MVP candidate and led them at least to
He was really
13-win
good
season.
for like 2.5 seasons, and we've never heard from him since.
Sure, but it nearly, if you had just extrapolated, it essentially did lead Philly to a Super Bowl.
And I don't think people were excited about Dak at the time.
People, not at the time. Yeah,
Right.
no. So
Let's continue the draft history bit real
Well,
quick.
so I'm going to get there in just a second, because there's 56. There was a comment for Zach Martin, which was a little bit surprising support, but he was that good coming out, and they were
the
getting
last bit of this is the kicker, though.
That's a good point. It wasn't Johnny Manziel. I think that's the moment that a lot of people point to as, oh, maybe Jerry isn't pulling every single string. Maybe there are other voices in the room that are impacting this, and the decision isn't only being made based on who's going to sell jerseys. And it worked out really well. Zach Martin worked out really, really well. Comment 57 is illustrative of who Caleb Downs is a little bit, because Keith Sampson said decades. Decades, honestly, because I don't think people really understand what level this kid is on. And if we can pull up some of the further draft history, let's go back to VO 51. This will bring you back 10 more years. I was here to see Byron Jones get drafted. Physical freak, really, really smart kid. Some similarities, at least in terms of from a mental perspective, to Caleb Downs. Didn't work out nearly as well as I think we think Caleb Downs is going to work out, but we'll see. Des Bryant obviously is going to be one that I know people were super, super excited about. If we can go to 52, 52 is the next 13 years, because there's a lot of years in there where they didn't have a first-round pick.
So now you're going from 05 to 92, because they had at least 3 or 4 or maybe even 5 years in there where they didn't have one at all, as you just mentioned. But D-Ware, awesome, transformational player.
But did we know that coming out of Troy?
Exactly.
Probably not exactly right out the gates.
But the rest of these names, that Marcus Spears an aside, Terrence Newman a bit of an aside, the rest of them, that's a bit of a dearth.
It's not a great board.
That's a bit of a dearth. Thankfully, we still have one more slate of here on draft history, because the big 3 in 90, 89, and 88 kind of saved this board too, if we're being totally fair.
91 was really good too.
Sure, but the top half.
Yes.
For thinking 87, 86, 85, 84, all due respect to Billy Cannon Jr., Kevin Brooks, and Mike Sherrard and Danny Noonan, not exactly the first names that I would come to mind. Hello, Noonan.
One more to get to, a viewer comment number 58. As we hit the 2-minute warning. If we can pull up comment 58, our final slate of the day, comment number 5, there was a big UT fan that
Yikes.
just off of
Was this Michelle's burner account?
experiencing. Jonathan Lichtner says, being a UT fan, I watch CD Lamb torch us every year, so I begged for us to pick him. And there's and he
Jonathan?
he said same situation with Caleb Downs. UT has some nightmarish memories with Caleb Downs playing against them as well. So.
We sure do. I looked at them as we were talking about this segment before we got started today, and I said, "Oh, DeMarvion Overshown for sure." Mike was like, "I was like."
You were this fired up for DeMarvion Overshown?
Buddy, you
He's
talk
worked out
about
great.
a personality in the locker room. If he could
That's
stay
true.
Yes.
healthy, DeMarvion Overshown. I mean, I'm talking back to his college days. He struggled with injuries during college as well, and obviously we've seen what's happened to him in the NFL so far. But yeah, talk about excitement. Like, people love that guy.
I am
He's
on
never
record
zero.
as saying he is my favorite Cowboy to cover. I have said this on the air before. He is an
Freaking awesome.
absolute joy to talk to in the locker room, to
Yes.
watch practice, to anything.
Yeah.
He's electrifying.
And personal connection to these players in terms of excitement matters, as you kind of mentioned yesterday with one of the comments. Somebody said Leighton Vander Esch because they were
Yeah.
from the Idaho area.
Yeah.
That's part of this too. This is not like a universal concept, but it's
Right.
more thinking like from a broad perspective, who was the most
How
exciting.
bad the team was when they were getting drafted and who they are as people.
and how
one
it fit
guy,
the need.
One guy did say Bullet Bob Hayes, and I'm like, hang on a second. Nobody since then? None of these guys got you
not
fired
Troy,
up?
not Emmett, not Michael Irvin, not Dez, not
If it's
DeMarcus
not
Ware.
Mike,
No.
there's no getting you excited.
Des Bryant was definitely one that people were super fired up about back in 2010, and he panned out quite well as well.